resource dependency theory. When I came across this theory, oh my goodness, I felt like it solved so many problems. Um, and I think it's the word dependency. Um, Drucker, I love Drucker, right? I never hide that. I think his analogy of a CEO or a corporate leader being like an orchestra conductor is brilliant, and I think that's quite accurate in today's world. And Drucker also told a lot of companies that were conglomerates. So let's say you were an auto manufacturer. Some auto manufacturers at one point felt like they had to create everything for that auto, from the tires to the windshield to the this to the that. That's not true, right? There's room for every company to do what they do really well. So he was kind of seeing that, you specialize and you do something in specific very, very well. And you have relationships with other companies, right? And so you have all these dependencies. And that kind of happens when with a customer, right? So let's say we go back to why I even want to do some of this research in the first place. And a customer is looking to find a solution to a problem. So they have their buying team, right? In a B2B case, they have a buying team. The customer decides, oh my goodness, I have a problem. I need to get it solved. So they go out and they try to figure out what they want, what their problem is, and what are some ideal solutions that they could employ. And then they have all the companies, right? The suppliers, right? This uses the word supplier. The supplier salespeople are available, and they're there to kind of help through the process, right, of selecting the right solution and determining what's the best deal and how can they help them best, right? But at the end, the customer wants to solve their problem, right, and spend a reasonable amount of money. And the salesperson wants to maximize the money, right, and sell the solution, right? And there might be some implementation services and things like that. But those goals are kind of at odds at each other in some ways. But if you look at this through dependency, resource dependency theory, in some ways, buying a solution like a digital transformation solution, well, that's kind of in this space, right? Because the customer is now dependent on the supplier. But the supplier is also dependent on the customer because the supplier is dependent on the revenue. And they're also dependent on the customer, right? Depending on what the customer also offers them regarding a case study or the successful implementation of the product. So it's really, really fascinating to think in terms of how these organizations are dependent on each other and how these relationships are asymmetrical, or are they? Right now, that's really quite fascinating. I can't wait to start talking to participants to discover this in more depth because I think there's a lot there, right? That kind of comes up in this space. Um, yeah, and then there's also some theories, and this kind of gets to the resource dependency theory gets to the larger organization, but then there's the individuals within it. And for that, they have interaction ritual chain theory, right? Which is kind of like when people come together and in a situation, there are emotions shared and there is an emotional feel, right? So think in terms of right now, we have FIFA, right? All the FIFA games, right? The World Cup. So we have all these World Cup games and everyone comes together. They have their rituals, right? They have their ceremonies. They have their the emotional impact of all of these, right? If there's a win, everyone has the rituals and ceremonies. They come together. Everyone knows how this works, right? And what to expect. And there's this emotional contagion that is expressed at the games. You can feel it. You can feel it even watching it on TV. All right, so that also happens in workspaces too. We like to think that work isn't very emotional, but that's not really true. We're human. Human beings are quite emotional beings, right? We can't hide it. So if you look at if the role of emotions in making a decision and you combine that with the idea of dependency, oh my goodness, like all the uncertainty, like you can see how this all bubbles up and why there's so many challenges. Right. And it's really quite fascinating. I really can't wait to investigate a lot of this even more because I think there's so many different dynamics. Because then you also will get into another theory, image theory, of how people make decisions based on their goals, their personal goals and values. They don't always make decisions like we like to think everybody's rational. And rational doesn't mean that they use logic, but they are going to make the decision that's best for them. But what is best for them? Right? It's not always money. It's not always driven by money or what gain looks like, because gain changes based on your goals and values. And sometimes what might give you what on a surface term as gain might be something very different. So anyway, I thought that was fun to share. Thank you.